you ever noticed how some tragedies just completely take over the news cycle for weeks, while others, well, they just seem to disappear almost as soon as they happen? Today, we're going to dig into a really powerful idea from the book Manufacturing Consent that might just explain why. It's a framework that asks a pretty provocative question. Does the media actually value some lives more than others? Let's get into it. So here's the core idea. It's called worthy versus unworthy victims. The theory goes that a propaganda system, whether it's doing it on purpose or not, basically sorts victims into two different buckets. You've got people who are abused in enemy states. Those are the worthy victims. Their stories get told with all the emotion, all the detail, and a ton of outrage. But then, you have people who are harmed in friendly or allied nations. They often get treated as unworthy. Their stories, they get way less attention and they're forgotten almost immediately. The book uses a couple of really stark case studies to make this point crystal clear. First up, the book gives us its classic example of a worthy victim. For this, we're heading back to communist Poland in the 1980s. This is Jerzy Popieluszko. He was a very well-known priest, a supporter of the Solidarity movement, and he was brutally murdered by his own government's secret police. Now, since this happened in what the West considered an enemy state, his case becomes the perfect test for the worthy victim side of this whole theory. The book's analysis doesn't just look at if he was covered in the news. It dives deep into how. And what it found was pretty specific. The media coverage was filled with gory details, and those details were repeated over and over. You could feel the shock and the outrage with these constant loud demands for justice. Reporters were digging, trying to find out just how high up the chain of command this went. And, maybe most importantly, Popieluszko was humanized. He was a real person with a story, not just another number. Okay, so that's the benchmark for a worthy victim. Now let's flip the script and look at the other side of the coin, what the book calls the unworthy victims. For the comparison, the source doesn't just pick one person. No, it groups together 100 religious figures. We're talking priests, nuns, missionaries, some of them even American citizens, who were all murdered in Latin American countries. And these countries were at the time U.S. client states, so not enemies, they were allies. And wow, the contrast in the coverage is, well, it's night and day. According to the book, the reporting here was the total opposite. It was low-key, it was brief. Instead of trying to stir up outrage, it felt like it was designed to keep a lid on emotions. Talking in these vague, philosophical ways about the tragedy of violence. The gory details were pretty much gone, and so were those loud, passionate calls for justice that we saw in the Popieluszko case. So we've seen how differently the stories were told, but the analysis gets even sharper when you start to look at the cold, hard numbers. This is where this idea of two different standards becomes almost impossible to ignore. Just take a look at this. This chart shows the count of front-page articles in the New York Times. For the one Polish priest, Jerzy Popieluszko, 10 articles. For all 100 victims in Latin America, combined, just 8. Just let that sink in for a second. One man in an enemy state got more front-page press than 100 people, including American citizens in friendly states. And hey, this wasn't just a front-page thing. This table from the book broadens the view. You look across the New York Times, Time, Newsweek, CBS Evening News, the pattern is exactly the same. In every single category, the coverage for the one worthy victim, Popieluszko, was more than the total coverage for all 100 unworthy victims put together. It's just staggering. So, what does this all add up to? Well, the book actually did the math, analyzing column inches and airtime. And the number it came up with is just, wow. Popieluszko was valued as being up to 179 times more worthy of media attention than a religious victim in a U.S. client state. 179 times. And this slide really brings it back home to the human level. It's just stunning. Listen to the language used. For Popieluszko, you get this visceral, horrifying, and deeply personal description of what he went through. For Michael Jerome Cypher, an American priest murdered in Honduras, the description is just sterile, remote, impersonal. The bodies were found in a dynamited well. The emotional difference couldn't be starker. So the big question is, why? Right? Why such a massive, massive difference? The source doesn't think it's just a coincidence. It argues there's a structural reason for all of this. The core argument here is that this isn't a mistake, it's a feature. It follows a very predictable pattern. Think about it. shining a bright light on the terrible things an enemy state does. That serves a clear purpose for foreign policy. It makes them look like the bad guys and us look like the good guys. But focusing on atrocities committed by a friendly government, an ally, well, that's just inconvenient. It makes you ask some really uncomfortable questions about who your own government is supporting. And this is where it has real-world consequences. This quote from the book just hits the nail on the head. Intense media coverage can actually put a stop to terrible things. It creates pressure for justice. But the opposite, a refusal to cover it, does the exact opposite. It gives what the book calls murderous clients the freedom to keep doing what they're doing without anyone watching. The spotlight shines brightly on enemies, while a curtain is kind of drawn around friends. And that brings us right to today. The book argued all those years ago that this system works best when most of us don't even realize it's happening. So the real question is for you. The next time you're watching the news or scrolling through your feed, try applying this framework. Ask yourself, who are the worthy victims in the story? And, maybe more importantly, are there any unworthy victims we're not hearing about at all? It's a simple idea that might just change the way you see the world.